Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London, and I'm delighted today to review a book from Routledge. They're part of Taylor and Francis. They produce a number of handbooks, and this particular one took our attention. It's the Routledge Handbook of the Law of Armed Conflict. It's an important book at this particular time in human history. We don't have that many wars on, funny enough, thank goodness, but what we do have, they're being looked at and viewed in a very different way from previous conflicts, and I think this book is just coming out at the right time as we reassess exactly what we're doing with some of these types of armed conflict as the international community, notwithstanding some of the appalling brutality that still takes place. The book's been edited by Rain Livoja and Tim McCormack, and as I've indicated, it comes from Routledge. We've given it a title. Elizabeth and I talked about the book, and we decided on a title for our review, and we've said The Legal Norms and Frameworks Governing the Conduct of War, a collection of erudite and thoughtful essays, and that's what you've got here. It's a handbook, so it's edited by the two people. The part of the handbook says it's a heavy book, and it's not a paperback, it's a hardback. There's the front cover, there's the spine, and then on the back you can see the basic information concerning the book. There's quite a lot of detail on the back cover, and it sets out a little bit about who the authors are. We open the book up. It runs to something approaching 660 odd pages. There's the index right at the back, and the index is by page numbering. So it's not paragraph numbering, it's page numbering with the index. And then right at the end you've got an article here, The Rule of Law in War, by Louise Aramatsu, who was once my pupil. And you can see Louise has written a very good article here, one of the books, and you can see there are plenty of footnotes throughout. And in fact, again, she rather nicely calls it a liberal project. And she's a strong liberal supporter. It's Louise, and it's a very good example, the last chapter, a very good example of what the book is about. Thank you, Louise. Now, at the front, we've got some detail. Routledge Handbook of War and Armed Conflict. There's the front page itself. And then you've got the various details, the contents section. Part 1, Part 2, 3, 4, 5. Then you've got Part 6 and Louise's article right at the back. Now, this is the list of contributors who are set out very clearly. The front, a large number of people involved in this. I can't mention them all by name. I've mentioned Louise because obviously I know her, and but I don't know most of the people. I know them by name, but not to meet. But you can see a very large number of people involved in this excellent publication. Now, what you've got after that are abbreviations, and I do think it's important when you're dealing certainly with this area of law and conflict. You do need to know all of the different abbreviations because there are just so many of them. You can see we're still running through. You thought family law and company law and land law were difficult. You look at the abbreviations here, you can see how many there are. Then after the abbreviation, you've got a list of treaties. Very useful again, starting in date order, which is quite important, running all the way through. Then after the treaties, the end of the treaties there, the most recent ones, we've got a table of case law. The case law is actually split into the different types of court: Permanent Court of International Justice, International Court of Justice, and so on. And then after that you've got tables of cases from the other panels, human rights. Then the individual countries are listed. And then you've got a foreword by Fatou Bensouda, which is always worth reading because you get some idea. Starting off saying, war with all its devastation to lives, to property, to culture, to communities and to the environment has been a tragically ubiquitous feature throughout every stage of human history. And as I've said, one of the interesting things is we don't have that many very large numbers of individual conflicts, but we do have conflicts, and very serious ones, and we're looking at it, I think, afresh. After the basic foreword. We've then got the introduction from the two editors, and then the book runs through. And as I've said, you've got paragraph numbering, generally speaking, and you've got a lot of footnoting to justify assertions made. It's a very good book, very much part of the house style of Routledge, and if I may say, the reason that I wanted to review this book was I thought it was a very important contribution to certainly international law as we have it at the moment, and the way ahead in the next few years, because we have no idea what's going to happen. Obviously we've got in this country serious problems with the unfortunate decision, in my view, to leave the European Union. That's going to cause a lot of changes to the way in which some of these books are written because of Britain's changing role within the global community. Let's talk about the book, though. What's the book about? This handbook is a new publication from Routledge, provides an information-rich, erudite, and for the most part objective resource of insight and commentary on the law of armed conflict, which is referred to throughout this volume as LOAC. The point is made that while LOAC was once the sole preserve, more or less, of military lawyers and generally regarded as an esoteric area of international law, unquote, it has now become an expanding discipline of ongoing interest to international lawyers in particular. And that's really where we come in, because that's certainly part of the reason why I wanted to give this book some prominence. As the two editors point out, the establishment of the world's first permanent international criminal court in 2002, quote, has raised global expectations that those responsible for wartime atrocities should be held accountable. And those same tribunals, they add, apply the law of armed conflict on a daily basis, constantly contributing jurisprudence and developing our understanding of the law. So we've come a long way from Nuremberg and what the Germans were warned about in World War II, and that was that we would be having accountability at the end of war. And that, I think, must be something that we must be very clear to any people who start on this road of military aggression. It is in the process of enhancing this understanding that this work of reference makes an important and vital contribution to the available literature in the field. Interestingly, Professor Tim McCormack, who co-edits this book with his colleague Dr. Rain Livoja, is a special advisor on international humanitarian law to the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court in The Hague, who's also, of course, written the foreword, and I quoted from it at the beginning. The book brings together in one convenient volume the work of no less than 36 or so international academics and scholars from a variety of countries, each offering his or her own insights into the diverse aspects of this vexed and often controversial area of law. The resulting 37 essays are grouped under 6 headings, from fundamentals through to means and methods of warfare and compliance and enforcement. There are articles, for example, on sources of the law of armed conflict, and in part 3, it's split into the various parts and chapter headings. Several essays cover weaponry, including conventional, chemical, biological and nuclear weapons, plus chapters on the law of naval warfare and that of air and missile warfare. And there are also essays which focus on the plight of women and children as the primary and certainly the most vulnerable victims in armed conflict. Referring to the unspeakable atrocities experienced by women, and often men, in recent, not to mention current conflicts, the authors of the treatise entitled Women and War stress that continuing to ensure that the realities women experience in times of armed conflict are reflected in the range of legal norms that claim to protect them, and it is an end worth striving towards, and we absolutely support that, of course. There is an historic perspective here as well, as in several other articles we saw, noting that as early as 1563 and onward there were prohibitions which held that sexual violence during wartime would be punishable by death. Certainly Wellington took that line in the Napoleonic Wars, and I think generally speaking it has to be absolutely clear what will happen if that sort of behaviour takes place, because it does take place unfortunately, far too regularly, and it's a absolute utter disgrace. And as I pointed out at the beginning, this must be something where the people who perpetrate this sort of thing know that if they're caught, they will be made accountable. And I do think that that is a very important factor. Let me conclude by saying, in all, the book provides a revealing and enlightening overview of the major issues which emanate from the law of armed conflict, which also encompasses international law and international human rights law. Notwithstanding the European Court of Human Rights, we're talking here about the UN Convention as well. Copiously footnoted with extensive tables of treaties and cases, it also offers scholars a rich source of references for further research, which means that NGOs and policymakers will also find it useful. And the publication date is cited at 2016. It's a very good book and an important book for the 21st century. There's the front of it, there's the spine, and then there's the back. It's a heavy book, actually. Nice paper, nicely set out. Naval warfare, right in the middle. Here we go, you can see the structure. Lots of footnoting, copious footnoting, as we said, which is good because it actually justifies a lot of assertions made. Again, you've got all of that there. And as I say, you've got the index at the back and Louise's article right at the back. She's actually got paragraph numbering like all the others. Then at the front we've got the content section. You can see the various parts split up there. And then chapter 1 here, war and armed conflict, the parameters of inquiry. Just kicking the whole thing off right at the beginning. It's an excellent book. Thank you to Routledge very much. Up to your very high standards as always, and an excellent book for the library. Thank you to all concerned for the work you've done on this. Goodbye.